we don't have to use the world standards for how our kids act. Oh, my kid's not acting like the world. That's awesome. I mean, that's great, because if your kid's not acting like the world, that's what, God says to be different than the world. He also says to be wise as serpents and innocent as doves. How do you make your kid wise while trying to keep his purity? Really, maybe innocence, a better word is purity. And that's this balance that we're fighting as parents.
We believe that you are strong by design, and you were made in God's image to have a strong body, mind, and spirit. You're listening to the #1 Strength and Health Authority podcast in the world. So let's get ready to unlock your potential and transform your life in today's episode.
Well, hey, what's going on? Welcome to another episode of the Strong by Design podcast. My name is Jared. I'm one of the hosts on the show, where we truly believe that God has a design for us to live, and He has designed it. And when we step into that design, things work the way that they're supposed to work. And so that's all things from the way that we're taking care of our bodies, through nutrition, through fitness, the way that we're challenging our minds and the different ways that we can do that, and our souls and our spirits. God has designed them to work and operate a certain way, and so we want to give you insight into what that looks like, the way to step into God's design in those things. And today we have a really cool guest. His name is Don Manning. He and his wife, and really his kids, are all part of this crazy cool family. It's a ministry that they are helping people, really, these are my words, not his, but helping them get back to God's design for family. What does that look like? And especially in a world that feels chaotic, it feels like we're being pulled in a million different directions. It feels like God's morality has slipped out the back door. And so here we are. We get to have a conversation with Don and learn a little bit more about what God has been teaching him and his family and the ministry that they're called to, and helping us understand, what does it look like for us to step into this idea of being a crazy cool family? What does it look like for us to step into God's design for family and really get back to what that looks like? So, Don, thank you so much for being here and taking the time to chat. We were able to chat a little bit beforehand, and it's cool to see God raising up these, it's not even new ideas, right? It's really this coming back to an understanding of God's original purpose and design for family. And it's exciting for me to see it happening in different spaces. And I'm just really excited to be able to connect with you today and hear your heart and what God has brought you and your family to.
Yeah, thanks. Already you're talking about fitness. I'm feeling guilty about the cinnamon roll I ate this morning. And so,
you and me both.
Yeah, and so, but it just really does. You said that we're going back, we're bringing back in, and that's true. Although it's also, here's what I see is that it's a new day of parenting too, because there's more and more influences on our kids, and also, but you're right, God has a design for family, and we are bringing back the principles are Scripture. They've been there forever, but how we apply them is actually changing as our culture changes, as technology becomes more pervasive, as kids are getting older at younger ages. I mean, our kids are getting older and older at younger and younger ages, and so that means our parents need to be prepared in different ways. And there's also different methods that are being successful. And so talking about all that, how you figure out, going back to the cinnamon roll, it's like, one of the things I want to tell parents a lot is, you don't have to be perfect. Mm-hmm. There's some things that you can focus on that will help you along the journey and help your journey be more likely to be successful. But we're all navigating this journey here, and we're all making mistakes, and we're all learning. And so we want to talk about that today. We want to talk about it in that context of how we're going to win, but also how we're going to be okay with some of the hurdles that come up, and that this is a journey that happens over, you're going to be a parent I'm working on, when I got married, my wife brought a 2-year-old to the marriage, and we've had 7 kids. So I've got a senior in high school. So literally that's about to graduate. And so I've been parenting for 34 years. And that's the journey we're on. We're not on this. We're not going to fix this in a day or two, but it gets better and better if we do certain things over time. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Absolutely. Yeah. I think that parenting, it can be a scary thing. And it's like, you can't run away. I mean, I guess some people do run away from it, unfortunately, or they try to hand off parenting to the church, or try to hand off parenting to the schools, or somebody else, and not. There's this fear of taking that responsibility, and so I know that you feel the same way as I do. That we really want to help parents take those steps in order to step into what it looks like to reclaim, being that parent. You talked about influences, and you talked about kids having to grow up at a younger age, and that's one thing for our family. We've tried to keep our kids as innocent as possible for as long as possible. Our oldest is only 12, so we're a few years behind you. But sometimes when I look at my 12-year-old who's now in middle school, he doesn't act the same as a lot of other middle schoolers, and it almost seems sometimes like it can make you feel like he's behind because he's not acting older. But then I step back and I go, I think that's a positive thing, to try to protect the innocence and have him not grow up too fast. So maybe I'm sure you have different thoughts on that as well. But
one thing is that play is children's work, and so when children play, they're working. It's interesting. The other day, I don't remember the numbers on it, so I'll butcher the numbers on this, but it's something like kids laugh like hundreds of times a day, and adults laugh like 20 times a day. I mean, again, I don't know what the number is, but there's your contrast.
If you ask my family, they tell you I'd laugh like twice if I laugh at all.
Yeah, and yet, we kids, God wants, he says, I've given you joy, and I want your joy to be complete. And C.S. Lewis said that joy is the serious business of heaven. And so he's right about that I think it's great we have a lot of discussions about how much do we protect our kids, and so, but there is an innocence that gradually will get lost over time. But but what we want to do is replace that with God's innocence and God's purity in their lives. We want to, and so I do think it's good that we try to protect. We can also overprotect our kids.
Sure.
But I think we don't have to use the world standards for how our kids act. Oh, my kid's not acting like the world. That's awesome. I mean, that's great, because if your kid's not acting like the world, that's what, God says to be different than the world. And so we're always exploring we don't want to be scared of those differences, but we also want to, he also says to be wise as serpents and innocent as doves. Okay, so how do you make your kid wise while trying to keep his purity? Really, maybe innocence, a better word is purity. And that's this balance that we're fighting as parents throughout the time. But both of them are important.
I mean, that's that preparation, right? I mean, eventually they're going to become adults, and so you can't keep them innocent forever, because then they don't know how to handle things when they're on their own.
Well, I'll give you an example of that. One of my boys, I always kind of do one of them so I don't isolate,
Sure.
him and the story. But, one of them went to college and came back and said, Mom and Dad, you didn't tell me enough. Because he wound up in situations where he was a little bit embarrassed because he wasn't knowledgeable. Now, that doesn't mean he has to experience it, but we could have done a better job of helping him to be knowledgeable about some things so that he enters social situations and can do it in a way that's that. Now, it doesn't mean he wasn't prepared. He was prepared in many ways, but there were some, we learned out of that. And so we have one that's a senior in high school. We're like, hey, we need to do a better job of preparing him, because he is innocent in some ways. There is a purity about him, but we also want him to be equipped to handle the social situations that come when he goes to college.
Yeah, that's good. That's you guys wrote a book. I mean, you wrote it together, you and your wife, but your kids also participated in that. And
That's
so
true.
I appreciate it. So this is, I'll show the book real quick if you can see it. This is the Crazy Cool Family book. You can find it on their website. You can find it on Amazon. But something that's what I appreciated. I'm going to appreciate it a lot in your guys' book. But you guys actually went to your kids and asked them, hey, what do you think about this? And so you actually document, their responses and things like that. I think that what a cool way to incorporate and even for us to be able to go and ask our kids those questions, to see their responses and their answers, because sometimes I think you think you're being a good communicator and you think that they know things that maybe they don't actually know.
Yeah. Well, there's a book I just got through reading called The Communication Code. Can't remember the author right now, but anyway, what I'll take out of the book forever is he asked this question: what is life like on the other side of you?
Mm-hmm.
And so I think as parents, okay, we want to influence our kids, whatever method we use. We might yell at them. We might, avoid them. We might lecture them, or we might talk to them, or we might just listen to them. There's so many different ways, but we're all we want the best for our kids. I rarely meet a parent that doesn't want the best for their kids. I rarely meet a parent who doesn't care.
Mm-hmm.
So it's not about caring. It's not about loving our kids. We all love our kids. It's like, are we willing to, but we want to have influence in them is what we're doing being effective?
Mm-hmm.
And that's what we try. That's what we studied for years. Jared, with 7 kids, it was like, I could see, like, after probably I have 4 girls and 3 boys. So at one time it was me and 5 women in my house.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, and I realized that there were a lot of things, not only about women I didn't know, but about parenting I didn't know. Yeah. And a lot of things about God I didn't know, and all these things. And so I was just desperate because I could see that I was going to have a really significant influence on my children. That there's no doubt that I was going to have this significant influence, and I only got one shot at it.
Mm-hmm.
And so I said, I've got to figure this out, or my life and my family is going to be a train wreck.
Mm-hmm.
I want God's design for my family because, and what we found is that, we kept studying families ahead of us. We kept reading all the literature, reading God's word, and just saying, God, what are you saying about the keys to raising a godly family? And we just kept finding it comes down to connection. That regardless of whether someone is a artist or an engineer, whether they're an athlete or playing guitar, whether they are a finance guy or a salesman or whatever it is, that the parents, homemakers or dual income, whatever it was, that the parents that connected to their kids, and they created this relational capital, if you will. Those are the ones. Again, there's no formula, there's no guarantee, and there's no straight pathway because everybody's different. But when those parents connected, we found that those parents were more likely to be successful than the ones that didn't connect.
Yeah,
and that was huge for us. And so we kind of, and really it makes sense that when you look at what Jesus said, when they asked Jesus what was most important, he didn't say obedience. He didn't say performance. He didn't say, that they're perfection. He said love. Mm-hmm. He said, love the Lord your God with all your heart, soul, and mind, and then love your neighbor as yourself. Well, who's your most important neighbor? It's not
Pam.
The people. Yeah. It's not the people at church.
Pam's our next door neighbor, just to give that reference.
Gotcha. Yeah, exactly. And so, okay, that's a great example. So, for example, you go to Pam, and and you're talking to Pam over the fence, over the shrubs. The classic, and you're talking to Pam, and and you're engaging with Pam, you're laughing with Pam, and your 4-year-old comes up, and you're like, "What are you doing?" It's like suddenly we turn and we're different to our children, and the environment we create in our home is different than it is with people that are next to us, And so much of that's out of the fear. It's out of the control. It's out of the things. And those are things that
it's very selfish. I mean, and I'm guilty. I'm super guilty when it comes to wanting my kids to do what I want them to do. It's because I want them to meet a need of mine, or it's not even meeting a need. I don't want them to get in the way of me being able to meet a need of mine, whatever it might be. It becomes very selfish very quick. I remember I had a bad day of being a dad one day. I don't even remember what it was, and I was just praying, and I felt God say to me, if these were Jesus's kids, would you treat them that way? And I thought, no, like if I was babysitting Jesus's kids, how would you treat them? And ultimately, that's what we're doing, right? Like our families are not our own, our kids are not our own. They've been given to us, especially as dads. Like it's our responsibility to take care of them. But ultimately, we want them to belong to Jesus, right? And,
so good. I mean, it's so good. I mean, think about that same situation with Pam. Maybe your 4-year-old's doing something that embarrasses you, and so you're going to control that. So you won't be embarrassed in front of Pam. Well, what's important is our embarrassment more important, or is the health of the child the most important thing? And so those are yeah, exactly. Those are. I mean, and we do obviously the way we act as parents so often is is we feel like that's most important. So that's the way we act. And, I remember as a one of the things we really like for parents to do, what I really challenged, I was talking to a dad a couple of nights ago, and a blended family. They've been married about 3 years, brought in 6 kids from 2 different marriages. And we were, they were struggling with some things. But then one of the things I'd done is told the dads, hey, are you being a learner about family? Are you being a learner about being the best dad you can be? And he comes up to me afterwards and he goes, you know what? I have never thought of that before. He said, I am in the IT world and I'm always studying how to learn technology better. He said, I'm a personal trainer on the side. And he said, I'm always learning how to be a better personal trainer. And he said, I've never thought about learning to be an awesome dad. And I was like, great. If that's all you took out of what we said tonight, and now I put you on the path of being a learner as a dad, then great. Let's go. Make that happen, because I think that, that's how I started with this, is because I'm a very competitive person. I've run marathons. I've competed at, different sports, and I just want to win. And I'm one of those that will go work hard to be my best. And whether it be, in college, it was like I was going to figure out how to create the perfect resume. And so, in kind of a sort of negative / positive way, when I started doing family, I'm like, okay, how do I win at this game?
Yeah.
What does winning look like? And I thought that was negative for a while, but then I read where Paul says, forgetting what lies behind, looking forward to what lies ahead, we press on towards the goal. And I started thinking about, well, how is family any different? God always wants us to be our best. He doesn't want us to be an ogre as we do that, but he does want us to pursue excellence in what we do. And it's like, what do we do? How do we do that in family? And I love y'all's podcast, because that's what you're about, is what is God's design for your family? Basically, how do you be your best? Like in fitness or whatever, your best in fitness may be different than my best in fitness.
Oh yeah.
Right?
Yeah. Body types are different. Personality types are different. We're all wired differently. Absolutely.
Yeah. And I wanted that for family too, as we started to have success in our family based on some concepts that we were following. I said, I can't just write this. It can't be a book about how to be the Mannings, just,
right.
Because, and one, you don't want to be that. You want to be, the best Haleys. We want to be the best Smiths, or the best, whatever that is. But it had to be, what would go across the Enneagram types and across the personality types and everything else.
Yep. Yeah, I think having that humility and as a parent, and being able to not only have that humility with people on the outside, but having that humility with your kids, and letting, a really good quote. I've said this a couple of times on the show. I can't even remember. I got to find out who said it. But basically they said, I didn't realize when I was growing up, I was watching my parents grow up.
That's good. Yeah.
And there's so much truth to that. I mean, I just turned 40 and I still feel like, man, I'm learning so much. I sat down with my 12-year-old yesterday and I told him, I said, look, I'm sorry. I'm sorry that you have to get the brunt of Mom and I's learning. You have to, you take it on more than anybody else, because you're the oldest. And I said, we've never parented a 12-year-old before. And so we're learning how to do it with you,
Right. Yes.
And he's like, that's okay, Dad. He's very gracious to us, and things along those lines. But, I just wanted him to know, like, hey, you're important and you're valuable. As parents, we're going to mess up because we're not perfect either, and that's kind of the culture that we're trying to develop with our kids is a culture of learning and humility as we approach life.
Yeah, in Deuteronomy 6, I think it says that you teach them along the way, when you lie down, when you rise up, when you walk along the road. And I love it that you had that conversation with your son, because that humility goes a long way towards helping them to feel like that. So often it's the parent needs to think they're perfect, and and therefore the kid needs to think they're perfect. What does that do? It creates hiding, because we're not perfect, and we hopefully we are. We talk a lot at Crazy Cool Family that it's not about perfection; it's about direction. It's where you're going, and if you're and if you see your kid and you going along the way well, then that's where you want to be.
Yeah. There's two big points in your book that you guys teach through, and it's not just in your book. You guys have other things that you teach these principles as well, but it's relational and cultural.
Yeah.
And they really go. Even as we're having this conversation, I'm seeing how it's not one and the other. They're very intertwined.
Yeah.
When I'm thinking of this whole concept of a relational culture, how do you, if I'm listening to this, okay, and this is for our listeners right now who are listening to this right now, they go, okay, I want to be a better parent and I want to move into relational parenting and not control parenting, and I want that to be a part of our family culture.
Yeah.
What are some steps that we can take? Because it's really hard, because we think as parents it's my job to give guidance as far as what to do and what not to do. How do I move away from that in a way that I don't even know how to ask the question correctly. I think that probably what I'm getting at, and some practical steps and application to moving away from the military family into the relational family.
Well, and first of all, one of the things that I love to tell parents is that it doesn't mean we change our standards. Mm-hmm. That so often when we get into relationship and culture-based parenting, we think, oh, I'm going to be an easy parent now. Well, mm-hmm. I need to be tough on them, and it's not a matter of, I'm going to bet that, my standard for my kids is I want them to love the Lord at a high level. Mm-hmm. Now, that doesn't mean, I do think there's things with achievements and things that do change as if my kid's really going to love the Lord, that may or may not mean he's a professional baseball player. Mm-hmm. It depends on where God's voice, you guys teach a lot, Jared, about hearing God's voice. Well, one of the things we do is we release that to God's will for their lives. But the standards of them loving Jesus and treating people well and being confident in themselves, actually, I think my standard moved up as I became relational, because doing relationships at a high level is so rewarding, but it's so rewarding personally, but it's also so benefiting to our children. When our children know how to connect with God, they know how to connect with their parents, even they know how to connect with their siblings. They know how to relate to people in the outside world. I went to my I went to my barber. I went to this new barber the other day, who I'd had the same barber for many years, and I needed a change. And so, because he retired, my barber retired. That's what happens when you get old. But anyway, so I go to my kid's barber, and my kid's barber's name is Lewis. And I said, Lewis, I'm meeting the famous Lewis. My boys have told me all about you. And you know what Lewis told me? He goes, I love having conversations with your boys. They are so insightful. Well, they've been taught to do that at home. You know, he didn't have to tell me that. I mean, maybe he did. Maybe he just wanted my business. I don't know. But I mean, but you know, but relationships are important, and it doesn't mean that you change the standards. In fact, as we become relationally healthy, actually our ability to live goes up. Our standards of life goes up. And so relationships are, and one of the things we found as we started to study family a lot is we were managing more to the relationship and the connection and less to the behavior. So that's a principle that somebody can take with them, that when we manage life to the relationship instead of to the behavior, that the behavior, if the relationship is strong, then the behavior will be the result of that. If my child loves the Lord, they're going to be an easier kid to raise than if they don't love the Lord. If their relationship with God is strong. If I know my child and I have a strong relationship with them, I'm naturally going to parent them better. Why? Because I know them. If there's trust in the relationship, they're more likely. With relationship comes influence. So the more relationship we have, the more influence we have. And so often we're so focused on the behavior and controlling the behavior that we lose the relationship, which causes us to lose the influence.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
I know that. Yeah. I know that you have like 4 pillars of your culture, as far as building a culture in a home. And one of those is safety. And it sounds very much like, I used to work at a company called PrEP, which was Prevention and Relationship Enhancement Program. It was basically like preventative care for relationships. And one of their key principles is making it safe to connect. And so what it sounds like is when you're investing in the relationship, you're making it safe to connect, where when you're investing in the behavior, you're creating almost a culture of fear and anxiety, because they no longer have that safety to come share with you the things that are going on, because they're afraid that they're going to get into trouble.
Well, if relationship is the what, it's kind of where we're going with it. Culture is the how. Culture is the way we do it. You know, so in our pillars of culture, one of those, and it's things you think about. What we really try to do is create certain belief mindsets in parents. For example, and one of those we just already talked about is that relationship, the connection leads to influence. So I'm focusing less on control and more on connection, because and ultimately in the long term, it's going to give me the most influence. So another one we would say, as far as the culture pillars, one of our pillars is to encourage. So what we talk about, there's 5 words that I leave with every parent that I talk to just about, is that we encourage extravagantly and we correct carefully. It's not that we don't correct. It's just that most parents overcorrect and under-encourage, and so they lose the connection with their child. I mean, think about when you look at your friends, who do you want to be around? Do you like being around that friend that's always criticizing everything you do? Guess what? Our kids don't like it either. Back to your point about listening and being safe. It's not safe physically, it's safe relationally, so that what if your kid can come to you with anything? Now, and so often, let's go back to those standards for a minute. Okay, if I always tell my child what to do, and think about it from your own perspective, if somebody's always telling you what to do, what happens with that person? You tend to want to tune them out, because they're always being critical. They're always telling you what to do. They're a know-it-all. They always know. But what do you do with that person? So often I have friends that are just great friends that just listen to me and almost make me draw out the advice. But many times as I talk to them, I'm coming up with my own solution. Well, guess what? Our kids can a lot of times do the same. They're smarter than we give them credit for. And so, how many times so often I always say that, what if you make it their idea versus having it be your idea? What if you ask them questions? Hey, so often my wife is like a master at this. One of the things I tell dads a lot, if you'll become a student of your wife instead of her critic, you'll be amazed what you learn about family. Because many times these ladies that God has put in our lives are much better at the relationship part than we are as guys. But I would watch her just ask these questions to her kids or to other people, and all of a sudden the person would go, or the child would go, hey, you know what? I probably need to go ask forgiveness from that person. And my wife would be like, wow, that's a good idea.
Yeah.
She knew it all along.
Yeah.
But she never told them that. And then she got them to come to their own conclusion. It's like, when you do that, that's like next level ninja parenting.
Yeah.
And those are the things we teach. Again, it's not about changing the standards. It's like, what if we talk to them about their curfew as they get older, and then they come in on time because they want to? It's not about having a rule in their lives. It's about, hey, it's good for me. I talk to my last teenager at home all the time. I'm like, what are you doing home so early? Well, I got to get up in the morning. Great. I'm not it's not like I'm texting him at 9:30, are you home yet? Are you home yet? Are you home yet? He's learned to do that on his own. And that's where we want to be as parents.
Yeah. Yeah. There's an amount of trust in God in those spaces as well, because I know that as parents we worry about our kids. So this is the first year that our son gets to go to middle school camp, and it's going to be the first time that he's away for 3 days. And so there's an element there too of. Yes, I trust my kid to make good decisions, but I also trust that God's going to protect him on the journey to camp, while he's at camp, on his way back, which I think as parents, we have to, that's a growing thing for us as well, is learning how to let go of that control and learning how to trust God in those situations, because we think...
Well, Jared, take that situation of camp. That's a great situation. And so, your child is going, there's supervisors that are there, and also, but there's definitely ways for him to get in trouble. There's definitely ways for him to do that. And then just a couple of, so one of the things, that parents might do is it turns into a big lecture of, now don't do this and watch this and don't, but what if you sat down and talked to him, and I bet you guys did this, and said, hey, let's talk about camp. You've never been there before. Guess what? I went to church camp when I was a little kid. I went to a deal called Camp Copus in Denton, and telling kids, oh, wow, Dad, you went to church camp? But you're like, you might even ask him at that point, what do you think are some dangers of going to church camp? And then, well, how are you going to, what if some boys had some, cigarettes or something, and they are vaping, not cigarettes now, it'd be vaping or whatever, but, they bring you, and they're over there in the woods, and they wanted to have you vape with them or whatever. I don't know if that can happen at church camp, but I mean, I'm just thinking about...
Anything can happen at church camp.
Exactly. And so, what would it helping him to go through scenarios?
Yeah.
And then let's say he came back from church camp and he said, Dad, it happened and I tried it. Okay, now what do you do with that? Well, guess what? He's in your home. You get to deal with it there. That's where, yes, and if he does it another 2 or 3 times, it's different. But when, even letting your kids make mistakes, putting them in situations, I love it that you're even allowing it. Some parents would say, I'm not going to let my kid go to church camp because you never know what's going to happen at church camp. Or I'm not going to let my kid do certain things. So that's the type of stuff that we're talking about, is how you build relationship and you build culture into, even giving them the spiritual experience of church camp. That's an amazing thing to do as a parent.
Yeah, it is something that we're learning how to grow into those spaces. I think as parents, we're better when it comes to like spiritual exercises or relationship with God, where we don't want to, because we want to cultivate a relationship with our kids and God, for them to have their own relationship and not to be us telling them how to have that relationship. So we definitely do a lot of those, asking well, what do you think God would say about that? Or, whatever it might be. A good example is, since we're picking on my oldest, we'll continue to pick on him. But he came up to us one day and said, "Man, I don't feel like I should be playing with Pokemon stuff anymore." And we're like, "Oh, interesting. Why? Why is that?" And he said, "Well, I just feel like there's something evil tied to them." And I was like, tell me more about that. It was more just asking questions.
Right.
We never said, like, you can't do this or you can't do that. I know, Harry Potter's another one that seems to be pretty controversial. People fall on one side or the other. And obviously there's things that you protect your kids from that are definite dangers. But some of these more borderline stuff, we want our kids to come to their own conclusions about what God is teaching them. Like you said, they're way smarter than we give them credit for, and they're very wise and discerning. And I'm surprised over and over again the conclusions that they come to, that you're like, holy cow, that's amazing. I don't know that I would have gotten there at your age.
And it also doesn't, again, back to the standards, because I hear from a lot of moms and dads. Well, you're dads especially. It's like, well, you're trying to, have us be soft on the kids. And it's like, I don't think so, because I believe that we challenge them to be their best, that it's more of an inspiring way of parenting. And you look at what Jesus did. Okay. So Jesus took 11 unschooled teenagers and one Pharisee, Paul, and he changed the world for them. Well, you look at how, I think that the way Jesus talked to his disciples I always wonder why the Bible doesn't have more rules on parenting. I think it's because we see a lot between the relationship of God the Father and God the Son, and we also see the relationship between Jesus and his disciples a lot in the New Testament. Well, John 15, he said, he said, "You did not choose me, but I chose you and appointed you to go and bear fruit that will last." Okay. He's calling out who they are. These are, can you imagine? Think of the questions they ask him. Hey, Jesus, who's the greatest? Hey, Jesus, Peter denied. He knows Peter's going to deny him. He says, all these things that they ask, these silly, stupid questions. And yet he says, "You did not choose me, but I chose you and appointed you to go and bear fruit." So he calls out who they are, and he calls out what they're going to do. The verse before that, he says, "I no longer call you friends, because I no longer call you servants, I should say, because a servant does not know his master's business. Instead, I've called you friends, for everything from the Father I've made known to you." So now again, Jesus didn't lose his position with his disciples by calling them friends. He's still that. What would they call him? They call him Lord. They call him Rabbi, because that's what he is. He hasn't lost his position by elevating them and helping them. And and out of that, every one of those guys died a horrible death for him, except for John, who gets exiled to the island and writes Revelation. Every one of them dies for him. Why? Because he has inspired them to greatness. What do we do? That's what I'm talking about, especially to you dads who, I believe that, that we have different roles in the family. And one of the things dads do as much as anything is they bestow identity to their children. They give them identity. And if they do it well at the front through relationship, and like Jesus did, as an example of what Jesus did with his disciples, then those kids will go run through walls for the dad, and eventually they'll run through walls for God.
Yeah, I like that word, inspire. That, it's our job as dads is to inspire, and inspire and challenge our kids. And certainly that's where we're at, And when you think about developing this culture at home, a I always think about how when our family goes out to eat at a restaurant and we're just sitting there and we're eating our meal, inevitably somebody will walk over and say, "Man, your kids are really good. How do you get them to be so good?" And we're thinking, "What do you mean? They've been messing around the whole time. They've been terrible."
Yeah, yeah, exactly.
The reality is it's because this is what we do at home. We sit around the table and we eat at home, and it becomes normal. And so I think part of developing that culture at home is teaching your kids that what's normal or what should be normal in the kingdom, so that when they go out into the world, even though the world might not see it as normal, they perceive it as normal. Does that make sense?
Yes, and you've hit it very well. That's culture, because what is the atmosphere of your home? And home may be when you're at the restaurant, home may be when you're on the ball field, it may be in the car, it may be at home, but I mean, what is you're always building the culture. We talked about this before the podcast, that you're always building the culture of your home. It's just a matter of, are you intentional about it, or are you letting the culture flow? And so, if, for example, you are building a culture, and culture, all culture is, well, let me back up. Culture is based on values. And a value is simply something that's important to you. So, for example, one of the things in our house that's a value one of the things we love and is important to us is basketball. Now, that doesn't mean that, it doesn't always have to be spiritual things. So, at the time of this recording, our Dallas Mavericks just got beat by the Celtics in the NBA Finals. Well, because we're kind of a basketball family and we've played a lot and done a lot, we have family basketball games and things like that. When the Mavericks are in the finals for the first time since 2011, we're watching it. And we're experiencing it together. And so that's a value. That's part of our family culture. It doesn't have to be just, godly stuff, but that's I use that as an example because mom and dad can go, yeah, okay, we like music, or or whatever it is. But then it's also things like, my second daughter, Father's Day was just a few days ago, and she gave me a voice text or whatever, and she said, "Dad, I just want you to thank you for being a dad and doing things that were part of our culture. Like, says you coached our sports teams. And so therefore now I think every dad should coach their sports teams, because that's part of what you showed me as a dad was what we did, those type of things. And I hope that helps parents to see that it doesn't have to be hard, but it doesn't need to be intentional. A value that we have in our home is our children will be best friends. Okay, so somebody told us that 25 years ago probably, and we talked about it. We said, you know what? That is a value we want in our home. And so we have worked really, really hard. But today, my 7 kids really do invest in each other. So what you put in place, and Jared, what you guys are putting in place right now are going to, it wasn't always the case. And there were times that, a couple of the relationships were really hard. But yet we kept fighting for it, and now it's become a reality in our family.
Yeah. And again, that boils down to the relational piece, right? And I know for me growing up, even, it's fun. My parents didn't. I don't think that they're intentional about this. I just think that it was part of their value system, was the relational piece. I always came home on time. I never fought that. It was like, that's when I'll come home when that's when I need to be home. My sister and I, as soon as we hit high school, I think that's when we really became really good friends, and we're still really good friends to this day, and so and we tell that to our kids all the time as well, hey, friends are going to come and go, but you guys are together forever, you're family for life. And so just always coming to that relational piece. I have a really good mentor of mine that he had, I think he has 4 kids of his own, and then they had 2 foster kids as well.
Wow.
And they're all grown up now, and they're all in ministry. And I remember asking him, I said, what did you do?
Yeah, right.
Like how did you get all of your kids to not only love Jesus, but actually now serve in ministry in some capacity? And his immediate response was, I don't know. I don't know what I did. But as he began to think about it, he said, we were always invested in our kids' lives. And when they grew up, they didn't have to go anywhere else to find good relationships, because we had good relationships with them. And so when they they had friends outside of us. Of course they did, but it was never like, oh, I can't get this from mom and dad, so I have to go get it from somewhere else.
Right.
The relationship was so good and so strong, and they developed a culture where the kids actually wanted to be home with them.
Sure.
Like, they enjoyed being at home with them. They didn't have to go seeking fun and things outside of the home. And that's how it was for me growing up too. I loved being at home. I loved playing games with my parents. If we can create that culture and that atmosphere for our kids, and we like that. Like, my wife is all about hospitality. We love having the neighborhood kids come to our house. We love that when they come, that it's a place that even their friends feel safe and feel comfortable in that environment. And so that's just it's such an important piece that I think gets lost in this idea of, I got to make sure to fix the behavior of my child as they grow up.
Well, I mean, so think about when you go into, I love that. And I think that parents need to be thinking about, what is the culture? What is the atmosphere? Think about your home. It's kind of like a greenhouse. And if you have, why do we use a greenhouse? Because we have the right water, soil, light, temperature, all that is in that greenhouse. Well, that's the one place that we can actually, I get parents come to me all the time and they say, I hate the culture of my home. My kids fight all the time, or, nobody's happy there. Everybody wants to leave. And I'm like, that's awesome. And they look at me like I'm really weird, because I'm like, the reason it's awesome is because you have influence over the culture of your home. And you can create, for some kids, for many kids actually, home is the worst place they go every day, because it's the place they're the most criticized. It's the place they're the least listened to. It's the place that they, there's a lot of jealousy there. There's a lot of things. And so, and we like to teach parents how to, Jared, I've got this crazy belief that anybody can win at family, and anybody can win at culture, and anybody can create the culture. Now, sometimes we got to overcome, one of the things we say at Crazy Cool Family is that the most important thing you can do for your family is to present them the healthiest version of you. So back to, your strong by design stuff. I mean, it's like, yeah, it's important. Sometimes we have to overcome things in our own life. I have grown, if I wouldn't have been in a great church that discipled me and had some great mentors that helped me as a person, I could not be the dad I am today. Okay? And I want to tell those dads, I was not the dad I am today 25 years ago. It is a journey. It is something, but, then we kind of apologize for it. Like, well, I'm still screw up dad. Well, yeah, but I'm a lot less screw up than I was 25 years ago. Yeah. There is a journey at which we can get better at it. I mean, I'm not going to go play golf. That's one of the reasons I don't play golf, actually, is because I figured out I couldn't get much better at it. And I wasn't willing to put the time into it. I didn't like going out and not being any good at it. Well, but if I really focused on it, I could have gotten better and I did get better as a golfer when I did it. Same thing with a dad and being a mom. Well, let's become more of that, and let's create a better and better culture in our home, because it's going to help our kids to flourish, and it just makes family more fun. I tell people all the time, it's like, I got 7 kids, and family's the easiest thing I do every day in so many ways. Why? Because I know how to do the relationships, and my kids want to do the relationships, so that we want to repair things we don't want to leave things hanging. And that makes family fun, and it makes it enjoyable. It makes it safe. That's what I want for every family listening here today,
They say, Scripture says, "Don't go to bed angry." And a lot of times we apply that to marriages. We've applied that to parenting as well, and so we don't want, for so many times we've had some sort of conflict where we sent kids to bed and we end up going and waking a kid up just to have a conversation with them, because we don't want them sitting in their, we don't want them having that thought process in their mind about all the negative things that they could, who knows what they're thinking about, especially I feel like kids today think about a lot more negative things than I did when I was a kid, and so it's one of those things that we want to repair that relationship, so that they can go to bed and have a really good sleep.
It's the influences in their life. I mean, they're being barraged every day. It's one of the reasons I love that you're sending your kid to church camp, because we have to give our kid experiences. It's a different fight than it doesn't mean, I don't know if it's harder or easier. We always think that parenting's harder, for the future than it was in the past or whatever.
Sure.
And we always reminisce about the older days or whatever, but it's definitely different. And if we don't have influence and help our kids with bringing relational experiences into their lives, man, they suffer. But if we do, we get in it. And it just doesn't have to be that hard. It's more what we're trying to do here, parents, is we're trying to give you some things that become a way of life, that you learn over time. And, I always compare it to like you look at a baseball player that's in the major leagues, and he hits the ball 400 feet and it looks effortless. Well, there's a lot of work that went into making that look effortless. But when they put the time in, it does look effortless. That's the way parenting can become in so many ways. If you learn the right things and you build the right culture, what you're doing is like, man, it just looks like you got 7. I mean, I get people, again, tell me all the time that they say, you got 7 kids and it looks like you're not even sweating. It's like, well, but I mean, you don't realize, one, what's going on behind the scenes, but also what we've learned over it. It took 7 kids to help me figure out how to be a dad in so many ways.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, Don, I've really appreciated your time. I feel like you and I could probably talk about this stuff forever, and never stop the recording. But I really appreciate you and what God has called you guys to do, and really revolutionizing, I don't know if that's the right word, but the helping families transform the way that they are parenting at home, and creating the crazy cool family. So if people want to connect with you, or if you said, hey, here's a good starting point, where would you send people?
Yeah, go to crazycoolfamily.com and then scroll down a little bit. We've got a 5-day challenge that's in there that I always like to, and that gets us connected with you. We'll send you an email for 5 days. It really is it gives you a vision. So the best way to start changing the way you are as a parent is to have a different vision. Vision, what we believe determines our behavior. And so in that 5-day challenge, we start to talk a lot about the beliefs that need to happen, that just like a lot of things we've talked about here. And so then it'll alert you to some other resources you can get to. There's that you can do. But remember, I want to leave you with this, parents, is that go there and we will start you on the learning path. You don't learn to parent in a weekend. You learn to parent in months and years as your children grow up. So give yourself some space, but become a learner. Go there and connect with us. And then we've got a podcast, 260 episodes. We've been doing it this is our 6th year of it. Lots of valuable teaching in there. And just connect with us and let us start to drip into you over time what you need to do and where you need to focus to, over time, change the vision and to be able to inspire your kids to greatness.
Yeah, I love it. Well, thank you so much again, Don. Thank you guys so much for listening to the Strong by Design podcast. We release a new episode every single Wednesday, so make sure to check us out again next week, and we'll catch you then.
Thank you so much for listening to the Strong by Design podcast. If you found value in today's episode, please subscribe so that more people can find out about our show. Plus, you don't want to miss any future episodes with the amazing guests and topics we have lined up for you.